Uh-oh, folks. We got the scary music on. It's Halloween. Happy Halloween, everybody. What's going on? Tonight, we're going to discuss the scariest, there's going to be about three or four of them, the scariest parts of the bass fishing industry that 99%, maybe even 100%, save me, of the industry insiders just won't discuss. They don't want to touch these topics with a 10-foot pole. You know, that's kind of what I like to do. We're going to go ahead and get into them tonight. We're going to talk about the scariest parts of the bass fishing industry. And, yeah, anything else y'all want to talk about, just like all of our live shows. So get that brown in your cup. Cheers, y'all. Let's get it. Are y'all scared? Does the music scare you? What's more scary? This or the music? This music's not nearly as good as I remember from the movies. I guess it's just not as ominous of music if there's not a dude with a knife stalking around the neighborhood, right? Like maybe that's it. Well, that was not as good as I was hoping for on the music. We'll fade that out. Epic fail. Welcome to live television, folks. What is going on? How are you guys doing this evening? Lovely Halloween evening in East Texas. Went out and caught a bunch of fish today. Went with my boy Heath Taylor. You guys will see some action from that, of course, coming up over the next week or so on the video content. Had a great discussion with Heath on swim bait fishing. And, you know, he's a swim bait guru, man. He makes them, he fishes them religiously, and he is, if you ever fortunate enough to get in a boat with the guy, he is unbelievably good at drawing bites with swim baits. That's a scary costume I'm wearing. That's the comment of the night right there. It is a pretty scary costume I'm wearing, I guarantee you. But, yeah, that was awesome. And while we were doing that, we had a great discussion while we fished, and it's super in-depth on everything I could think of to pick his brain about swim bait fishing. So if you like swim bait fishing, or if you're curious about swim bait fishing or wanting to get into it or new to it or whatever have you, you're going to want to see. That's going to be kind of must-see TV for you on that, to get inside his mind in depth like we did about swim bait fishing. It was phenomenal. So very proud of that content that's coming up next week. Tomorrow morning I will be going out with our area biologist, Jake Norman, to film some more content for you guys. We should have some great content coming up as far as information and education, along with some bass fishing action while we're doing it. We're going to be live 3 nights in a row this week. We're live tonight for the Halloween special. We're going to be live tomorrow evening with Ryan Salzman from Bass Pro Tour is going to be live with us tomorrow evening. We're also going to be live on Wednesday with Fletcher Shryock. That is the plan right now. So after tonight, 2 more nights in a row, and we will have call-in guests from the highest of levels with Bass Pro Tour. A lot of big changes. Well, not a lot. One big change at Bass Pro Tour. I'm sure we will be discussing best 5 versus every fish and anything else you guys want. Y'all be able to ask them questions as well. And many other topics that we will discuss with 2 of the top level tour pros over the next couple evenings after tonight. But for tonight, we're talking about scary stuff, man. What is the scariest parts of the bass fishing industry that 99% of the industry insiders just don't want to discuss? That's what we're about to get into. Right before we do, I want to take time to thank each and every one of you so much for watching. If you could, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up, man. That's going to help us out a lot. Also, drop us a comment. Let me know who we're talking to. And if you have questions throughout the live stream, drop it in there, especially towards the latter part of the live stream. I'll always take time to answer as many questions as I can at the end of these. And if you don't mind sharing this thing, I would sure appreciate it if you could share it. And if you like them, go ahead and subscribe, turn the notification bell on. That way you won't miss any of our content here at Your Lake Fork Guide. Let me say thank you to some of the early risers in the chat room. Give y'all some shout outs. We got Big John in the house. He shared it, man. I appreciate that, Big John. Thank you very much. Justin Hodges, Melvin Perkins, Texas Air Gunner, Matthew Strange, Billy Snow. What's up, Billy Snow? Randy Malloy, Eric Evans, Terry Connolly, Big Dog, Dusty Newton, MSH 822, John Chance is in the house, Michael Bray, Andy Alphabet. I know you're a big swim baiter. And Daryl Bortland, Busting Outdoors. We got more joining us now. Y'all just keep on coming on in the door. Ron Foreman just popped in. Thank you guys so much. Andy Alphabet, man, I know you're a huge swim bait dude. You like to throw them a lot. That video that we filmed with Heath today that will be airing next week, that's your video, dog. Like, it's really good. Cody Mays just popped in. Cody Mays in the house. My fellow Lake Fork guy, my brother from another mother, Mr. Cody Mays is in the house, man. Thank you guys so much for joining us. So, I guess might as well go ahead and get into it. What is the scariest parts of the bass fishing industry? And I started off said there's about three of them. John Seiko, what's up, John Seiko? Hell yeah. That's another one of my dogs right there. I love that guy, John Seiko. That's a good dude. Hangs around Lake Fork quite a bit. I'll never forget John Seiko. John Seiko, when I first met him, he booked a guide trip with me, and he brought this little kid out there, his son. It's been 4 or 5 years ago, maybe now. I don't know, John. You probably know better. Maybe 4 years ago. But his kid was pretty young, but his kid was just, boy, he was ate up with bass fishing. I mean, ate up with bass fishing. And at that time, I think it was summertime, if I remember correctly. Had a bunch of grass in the back of one of the major creeks on Fork. And I had a pretty decent little chatterbait bite going on. And, man, we got back there and got throwing that chatterbait. And his kid caught some good fish that morning on the chatterbait. And I think, if I remember, his kid had never caught him on a chatterbait or something like that. So I kind of got to take the morning to take a young guy that was 10 or 12 or whatever he was, who was really into bass fishing, really enthusiastic. And I really got to teach him kind of how to fish a chatterbait. And it's one of my favorite trips. Of all the, you're taking thousands of guide trips at this point in my life. It's one of the ones that stands out. It was one of my favorite trips because I got to, probably my favorite technique is a chatterbait, and I got to take a young guy who's just eat up with bass fishing, which I love being around those kids like that, and got to really hands-on teach the kid how to fish a chatterbait. It was an awesome day, just one that I still remember forever, and John's been super nice to me ever since and always been a good guy to me, and I appreciate that. So, John Seiko, appreciate you joining us as always, brother. Scariest parts of the bass fishing industry. We'll quit delaying. I think we've gathered enough folks in here we can break off into it, man. I love bass fishing. I love bass fishing. I love guiding. I love being a bass fishing guide. I truly do. And I mean, love may not even be a strong enough word for it. It's something that I need in my life, right? Like, it's something that I need to be able to do. Like, I would not be the same human being without bass fishing. Could I survive without it? Yeah, of course you could, of course you could. But I would not be the same person that I am without bass fishing. It kind of completes me, I guess, to quote Jerry Maguire. But man, I'm not always a real big fan of the bass fishing industry, right? Like, I'm not always a real big fan of that. And there's some things I love about it, and there's definitely some things. Maybe it's not that I'm not a big fan of the bass fishing industry. It's just that I really want the best for it because I live and operate in it, and I care so deeply about it. And so when I see things that are messed up and kind of scary to see coming, it bothers me. And maybe the scariest thing is just the insecurity, how fragile the entire thing is. It's very fragile. It can go away tomorrow. And we'll save that and kind of talk about that at the end. And that might be the scariest part of it, as a guy who lives and operates and feeds his family in the industry. It can disappear in a heartbeat out here, guys. It really could. But the things that are the scariest to me are ego. And what I mean by ego, and it's just human nature. It's not that any of these people are bad people. I think bass fishing predominantly is filled with some of the best people as far as an industry as a whole that you'll find. But all of us human beings are prone to ego issues, myself included, and yourself included. We all are. Pride, right? One of the 7 deadlies. I mean, it's a real thing. And that's all it is. It's ego is pride. That's what it is. And we lose perspective. That's the biggest issue to me in bass fishing that scares me to death, is we lose so much perspective when we're inside the industry hardcore, making our living in the industry. It's very easy to lose perspective with the guys that are 99% of our consumer base and are the lifeblood of the industry. Right? The lifeblood of the industry is the people that buy baits, fish in ponds, watch fishing YouTube videos. Now, it used to be fishing TV shows predominantly, but now I think it's predominantly watching fishing social media content. it's not, the lifeblood of this industry is not the guy that runs a $70,000 plus bass boat and fishes derbies every time he gets a chance on the weekend. That's not the lifeblood of this industry. And the entire industry feels like that is the lifeblood of this industry because we all have this thing, it's human nature for us to reflect ourselves onto everybody else. We assume everybody else is like us. Let me tell you, give you an example. Those guys that blur the backgrounds out of their pictures, they do that because when they see a picture of a fish, they're looking at the background trying to figure out where that guy is. So they assume that everybody does that. And to some degree, they're right. There are plenty of people out doing that. But if you had never looked at a background and tried to dissect where a guy's fishing at, why would it even cross your mind to blur out a background? We reflect our own self-image on everybody else. We assume everybody else is like us. And when you're an industry insider or hardcore bass fishing guy and you're tournament fishing or making your living like I do in the industry, you think that everybody that bass fishes operates and thinks and sees things the same way that you do, okay? So real quick, somebody says, you must have seen the 14.7 Milliken caught. Blurred actually did not. I've seen some posts pop up here and there about his biggest fish. I did not know it was 14.7. That's pretty freaking amazing. That's awesome. No, I did not see the picture with the blurred background from him. Lake Fork guides do it all the time. I don't need to see Milliken's pictures to see blurred backgrounds. But we all think that everybody else is operating like we do. And literally the vast majority of the bass fishing industry, as far as the consumers go, is guys that take their kids fishing. Or just go fishing for 5 hours on a Saturday or Sunday morning to relax from the stress of work that week. You know what I'm saying? Like, most of these guys, and they're trying to buy a boat. If they want a boat, they're buying the cheapest boat they can. You know, some used thing that'll just float and fish. And that's it. That's all they want to do, man. They just want to go catch a fish because it brings peace to their soul and they're passionate about that part of it. And there is nothing wrong with that. In fact, it is probably the much healthier way to consume fishing and be a part of the fishing world is to keep it like that and to enjoy it like that versus us addicts that get consumed with the competition and then when you start trying to make a living, now you get consumed with the greed and the money aspect of it, and all that's just human nature. But the scariest part of the bass fishing industry, one of the scariest parts that nobody talks about, that I hear, is how out of touch we are with 90+% of our consumer base. It bothers me. It's not like I feel like I'm smarter. I just feel like I was one of those guys for so long. I did not grow up tournament fishing. Even when I really got back into bass fishing hard and heavy, I started to tournament fish a little bit, but for the most part, I was still the guy that just wanted to go catch fish to quit thinking about all the other crap, right? Like that's who I was. And so I feel like I have a little bit more recent experience from that perspective, so maybe I still recognize it a little more and see it a little more than guys that have been in the industry their whole life or grown up around tournament fishing. And that's the only reason I bring it up, because I do feel like it's a major issue in our industry, and it's something that we need to become more aware of. And I feel like there needs to be more outreach to the consumers in the industry that are most of you guys. That's the reality of it. That's one of the scariest parts of the bass fishing industry. And I got so into that one, I forgot what my other one was. The fragile part I remember. There was something else that I was going to talk to you guys about. We can go ahead and talk about the fragility of this industry. The scariest part. Oh, I know what it is. The ego aspect. One of the other scariest parts is the ego aspect. How many guys, literally their day-to-day happiness, how content they are in their soul is dependent on how they catch them in comparison to other people in their area, on their lake, whatever. Like Lake Fork guides, for example. How them and their customers are catching them compared to other guides and customers literally affects how they feel about their own self-worth. That is some serious ego and pride issue there. That is a major problem, and the reason that part is so scary is because that part of the industry and the culture is what causes and drives most of the negative issues. The guys arguing on the water, fishing guys, tournament guys, arguing on the water, fighting each other. This guy's trying to think this guy's a bad guy because he doesn't like the way he's going about his fishing business. Or da, da, da. I mean, I've been in the middle of it because literally it stems from issues of jealousy of my issues personally started when I started making YouTube content. I had no issues with anybody on that lake when nobody knew who I was. When not a soul outside of a few people at Lake Fork knew who I was or knew that I existed or that I was trying to start a guide business, nobody cared. Everybody liked me. I was a very, very well liked guy by the people that knew me around Lake Fork then. When I started making social media content, I started getting a lot of attention as far as guide bookings go. My phone started ringing a lot. And maybe I come across as arrogant. Maybe that part of it's on me. Like I always try to look for my own blame. Maybe I did come across as arrogant. There were guys trying to tell me that had a lot more experience than I did, trying to tell me to not do the YouTube videos, and I just completely disagree with them. I thought it was great for business. I thought it was good for the lake, the business of the lake overall. And I thought they were just way off base and just hadn't done the research I had done. Now, it turns out over time, in a lot of aspects, maybe not every one of them, but in a lot of aspects, I was correct. I happened to be correct in the fact that, you know, it didn't hurt the guide business. It didn't hurt the other guides. I haven't seen any real mass exodus of fishing guides because I ran them out of business because I'm giving away too much information, which is one of the things they used to complain about. That didn't happen. If anything, we got more now than we did when I started, that's for sure. And none of the guides that had a decent business then have gone out of business, really. So in a lot of ways, I was right and they were wrong. But the ego issue with them was, over time, I've come to find out what it was is these guys have been doing it for a long time, and they had a lot more bass fishing skins on the wall, a lot more experience on the lake, a lot more time in the industry than I had, and they felt like they should be rated higher as a fishing guide than I was. And when I started getting a lot of views, or relative, I'm a speck in the social media world. I'm nothing. I understand that. But relative to the Lake Fork community, when I started getting a lot of views by doing social media content around fishing and guiding on Fork, and then I started getting a lot of phone calls for guide trips, their ego, it bothered them that I was possibly getting more phone calls for guide trips than they were, or as many, or close to as many. They felt like I hadn't earned that. Well, number one, it's not up to them to decide. Number two, it's not your job. Like, you don't get to decide it. Like, that's the free market's decision to decide that, not you, buddy. But it was the ego, and that the fact that they place their self-worth on they are a more successful fisherman and fishing guide than this guy, and if they feel like that guy is getting rated above them and they don't deserve to be there, then they're mad at this guy. That is an ego and pride issue at its core, and it's very, very bad, and it's very dangerous. And I'm not saying that I don't fall victim to some of the same stuff, because I absolutely do at times. I have some of the exact same faults on myself. It's just so ingrained in our culture in bass fishing. And it's gotten to the point now where guys have literally tried to ruin my life and have drastically negatively affected my life because of their spite and frustration with me, born out of ego in fishing competition. They have taken steps to do everything they can and use every bit of influence they have to ruin my life, and to a point where it's negatively affected my life. It's even in some ways negatively affected the lives of my children. We don't need to get into all that, but you know, it's kind of personal. But man, I have had some serious issues caused by other guides in the industry that all originally stems from ego. And you're gonna have to deal with that in this industry, and it's scary. Like, you can't control other people, you can't control what they do, but some of these people have a lot of influence in these small communities. The thing about fishing, very small communities. It's a small community as a whole, very small community in individual areas like Lake Fork. These people have a lot of influence there. It can make your life very uncomfortable. And as I've come to find out, if you slip up at all, they can be very detrimental to your life, on and off the water. And it's ugly, ugly thing. It's horrible. But it is human nature. And there is some of that in every industry you're in. You know, there is. All right. The third part, and probably the most scary and intimidating. And this is something that you guys individually can actually do something about within your own means to some level. The fragility of this industry. It is extremely fragile. It is a luxury thing that we partake in. We go out and we catch fish for sport. We're not catching them for food. It's not, a product industry where you've got a product, you go out and obtain that product, and you sell that product. That's not how this works exactly. We're not keeping these fish. It is a completely luxury thing that we're involved in. From the weekend guy, like, guess what? If your budget gets tighter, guess one of the things that you're going to cut out of your life? Bass fishing tackle, the newest baits, new rods, new reels, new boats, guide trips. Like, all these things are going to get cut out of your life if your budget starts getting tighter and tighter. Very fragile. And with what's going on in the world today, with our economy, and with everything in the world, really, the whole world's economy, I'm starting finally, for the first time since I've been in the industry, really all the way in the industry, I'm starting to see some of the effects and some of the fragility from equipment, baits, not being sold as much, guides that I know that aren't getting, a lot of guides. Most of the guides on Fork are not getting the trips this fall that they usually get in the fall. They're just not. Another way that it's fragile is it's Mother Nature. We're 6-7 foot low at Lake Fork right now. And for whatever reason, this time around, last time in 2011, of course, I wasn't living in the industry, making my living in the industry at that time. I was just a recreational guy. But in 2011, when the lake was 7 foot low, it didn't seem to affect the traffic. And maybe I'm just naive and blind to it because I wasn't out there as much then. But it seems like this time around with the lake being low, it is over the year, outside of spring, in like May and June, it has very negatively affected the volume of traffic. That affects everything. Hotels, gas stations, guides, you name it. I mean, everybody gets hit by that, right? This industry is extremely, extremely fragile. It's something that when your children's well-being depends on this industry, it opens your eyes. You pay a lot more attention to it. It's the scariest part. It really is. And I'll be honest with you, right now, guys, it ain't great around Lake Fork. There's gonna, mark my words, there's gonna be some fishing guides and some businesses around Lake Fork over the next 6 months to a year that go out of business. They're gonna have to leave the industry. And that's unfortunate, and I'm just going to try my best to hold on for dear life and not be one of them. But it is not good right now. It's not good right now. It's very scary. Sponsor dollars are tightening up everywhere. And that also ties in, which don't need to dive off in this because we can talk all night, us not having the right perspective with our consumer base hurts sponsor dollars as well. And the entire industry got a big wake-up call to that during 2020 in the COVID year. We completely shut down tournament fishing altogether, which the entire industry on the inside level, the guys, the big insiders, big-time people in the industry, top-level tournament fishing was always like where they marketed everything. Like that's where they spent their marketing dollars, where they spent their marketing budget. That goes away for a year, and everybody has record sales because there's more people fishing because they got nothing to do because of COVID. they started realizing that people don't need to see a tournament guy with that tackle to sell it. All that matters is getting the eyeballs on the product, and there are much more efficient ways to do that. If you're a bait company, you take a guy like me versus a guy like I don't know. Who's a tournament guy that doesn't do a tremendous amount of social media? I just name one. Now there's more and more of them doing it, right? But let's just say Cliff Crochet. I don't know Cliff Crochet from Adam, never met him. He's one of the few out there that I haven't met, don't know from Adam. I'm sure he's a great guy. But let's take Cliff Crochet. You take a guy like that versus a guy like me. Now, Cliff Crochet, for you to sponsor his boat and put your sticker on his boat and for him to wear your sticker on his jersey and all that good stuff and mention you maybe when he does finally get on TV once or twice a year, you got to pay that guy a pretty good chunk of change. Like those guys are going to want $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 from companies to be their sponsors, especially their title sponsors, things like that. Versus a guy like me that you can pay per view, and if your company doesn't get very much exposure, you don't pay very much. Pay $5, $7, $8, $10 per 1,000 views, right? And if I get let's say you pay at the very top, and you pay $10 for 1,000 views, and we get 100,000 views. Well, you just paid me $1,000. Like it's like that's all you paid me, right? Like, what was it, 1,000 or 10,000? I don't know. I'm not very good at math. Either way, you paid me a lot less, and I got you 100,000 views like that. Versus a guy that wants you to pay him that much money, and he has no guarantee of when or if he's going to get eyeball time for your company. I said we weren't going to go into it. We just went into it. But back to the topic at hand, the fragility of the industry. What we can do, all of y'all, and myself included as a fan of the industry, is you got to support the industry, guys. And this is not me telling you to come book a guide trip with me or buy my product. I'm not doing that in any way here. But whatever it is that you believe in and appreciate in the fishing industry, you got to keep them alive, man. You got to spend that money. I mean, that's at the end of the day, it's what it's all about. And I know it's asking a lot these days with the economy, but if we want this fishing industry to come through this economic downturn strong, and we don't want to lose guys out of the industry, we have to support it. You have to buy product. You have to book guide trips with guides that you want to stay in business. If a guy is sponsored by a company and he's plugging it, and they've got a code or whatever else that you can punch in to those codes that are like, hey, save 10% by using yada yada code. That is how those companies that sponsor those guys track what they're doing for them. And the more times that code gets used, the more that guy gets supported financially from that company. That is what we have to do as consumers in this industry. You have to support them. Have to support them. Absolutely. Well, I think I've kind of rambled enough. I've definitely kind of lost my train of thought. It's mind-numbing, and now I'm like panicking in my head because you start talking about all the scary parts, and it gets real scary. But the bottom line is the fishing industry is awesome. It is. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I cannot believe that I get to be a part of it. I tell people all the time, I don't go to work when I'm at what everybody thinks I'm at work. Like when I'm on a guide trip, I'm not at work. I'm doing what I love to do. I go to work when I get home and I've got to manage the app business, or I've got to edit content or produce content. Like that is the work part of my job. When I actually go to work, I cannot express to you guys how blessed that I feel that I have a job that I don't dread. I don't dread Mondays. You know what I mean? Like I get to get up and go fishing or take people fishing, which I've always had a huge passion for. That's the funny thing about me is I'm just cut out to be a fishing guide more so than a tournament angler, because I get every bit as much enjoyment out of helping someone else catch one and watching them catch it and teaching them something where maybe they can learn how to catch fish a little better. That gives me just as big of a kick and adrenaline rush as catching one myself does. I will say, when you're running a whole bunch of guide trips, when you're running a whole bunch of guide trips, every once in a while, you want to be like, say, dog, I need a day to go lean on them. Like you do want to go catch them a little bit once in a while. But I do. I sincerely do get as much enjoyment out of watching other people catch them and helping them catch them as I do catching them myself. Uh, let's get some comments and questions. If you guys got questions or comments you want me to address, let's go. A little brown water will help. There you go. There you go. Speaking of that, cheers, y'all. Buy from locals and not big box stores. That does help. Yeah, especially in the smaller communities. Like, I relate everything to the Lake Fork community because it's the one that I operate in. But yeah, absolutely. Waiting to buy a piece of tackle until you visit the Lake Fork Marina Tackle Store, for instance, or any of the other tackle stores around the lake, versus ordering it from Tackle Warehouse does help your local industry. I mean, we all know that. That helps tremendously. I get it that it's a lot more convenient to just order it on your phone and it's there in a few days, and I get it. And that's the way you choose to go. I can't fault you for that. But it does help supporting your local industry by buying local instead of the bigger box stores. Any advice on presenting baits to constantly moving fish? So I've always said when they move, you move. Just like that, when I move, you move. Just like that. If you know that song, we can be friends. Just saying. 90s kid, right? Anyway, when fish are constantly on the move, you have to throw moving baits and you have to keep moving. Like when they're roaming and chasing, and a lot of times fall is a great example of that, and I think that's probably why we're talking about that if I had to guess. But as they move up and down these creeks and pockets and all over the lake in the fall, and when fish get locked in on shad, they're going to move because shad are the most, short bus riding idiots that ever existed in nature. Like shad just wander all over the place aimlessly at times. I mean, they move a lot. And so in the fall, fish get really locked in on bait fish, they move a lot. But that's the main thing that I try to focus on is however much I think the fish are moving, I try to move that much as well. I try to cover water that much as well. One thing I will tell you that I've noticed when I've gotten in the boat with top level Elite Series tour guys, they fish a lot faster than we do on average. I'm just talking about, I'm sure at times they fish slower, and there's some of those guys that probably do fish really slow, and that's their strength. But for the most part, the guys that I've gotten in the boat with that fish at the higher levels, man, they cover water way more efficiently than we do. And I feel like the more those fish are moving around, the more important it is to cover more water and present your bait to more fish throughout the day. That's the deal. Maybe they bite it going slower and you catch one or two more because you slowed it down. But if you cover a whole lot more water, you might catch 10 more that you would have never got to if you slowed down. And so it's kind of that balancing act and that decision, one of those decision-making processes that we go through in bass fishing that make or break your day. When they're moving a lot, I like taking my chances on fishing real fast and moving a lot. May is a classic example. In May, I'm going to tell you something. If I don't catch a fish in about 10 minutes in May, I'm gone from wherever I'm at. Offshore spot, 10 minutes, gone. 5 minutes sometimes, gone. Shallow pocket, fishing down a bank, fishing a pocket, right, in May, wind around. Boom, baits coming in and out, baits coming in and out. Boom, fishing fast, trolling motor buzzing. About 10 minutes, I ain't got a bite. I'm gone. Move on to the next pocket. I will literally pick up and rack my trolling motor sometimes 50 times a day in May, moving around covering so much water. Go-to technique you can pretty much always fall back to when the water is low, not just on Fork, but anywhere. Is there anything that comes to mind? It's going to depend in all these types of questions, Cole, and I appreciate that question. I do. They're very tough questions to answer because so much of it is going to depend on the lake situation, that individual lake. What type of cover is present in low water conditions? What type of bait fish are they targeting? what time of year it is, how fast are they moving, how much are they wandering. Like, so to say one go-to technique that you can rely on when the water is low, I mean, if you just had to pick one and you just want to get bit, probably a drop shot, which is something I hardly ever, almost never throw. But like a drop shot in low water situations is going to catch fish on timber, it's going to catch fish on rocks, it'll catch fish on the outside of grass edges, it'll catch fish in a lot of situations. You know, a drop shot's just a bite getter. But am I fishing predominantly shallow? Because you can't have low water conditions and still have shallow relating fish, like we do in a lot of instances right now. Or am I fishing deep? Like in the summer when the water was low, I'm fishing way offshore because the fish are already kind of wanting to be offshore anyway because of the hot summer weather. Then you drop the water, it pulls them out that much more. Now the majority of your fish are offshore. Then I'm going to be fishing a completely different technique. Out there, I'll be throwing, you know, big jig, a deep diving crankbait, a big worm, all that kind of stuff offshore. Maybe a drop shot if it's really tough offshore. But if it's shallow time, and even though the water's dropping, the fish are staying relatively shallow, I'm going to be throwing a square bill, I'm going to be throwing a spinner bait, I'm going to be throwing a wacky worm, possibly a Texas rig, a drop shot. That's why I say maybe a drop shot, right? Like in low water, because that's the one you can kind of do any depth around just about any cover you'll find in low water conditions typically, and it'll probably work. I hate throwing a drop shot though. I mean, hate it as much as I can hate it. Are the shad in the backs of creeks? Yes, but they're starting to pull. Like some of them are starting to pull a little bit, and they haven't gone all the way back because of our low water conditions. It's like they never got all the way to the back corners because a lot of the backs of our creeks are like this deep for a long ways with low water conditions. They didn't get all the way back there. The water was falling too fast in October. I think they were pulling water to Dallas or something. The water was falling too fast throughout the month of October for those fish to go all the way back. So it was like you had to have a little depth change close to the bank line. Kind of had to keep your boat in that 4 to 6 foot range instead of that 0 to 2. But yes, the shad have been in the backs of the creek since the end of September, really, as far back as they wanted to be. Now some of them are starting to pull, and the main lake shad source is beginning to gather out on the offshore structure as well. For the biggest fish opportunity on Lake Fork, what season/month should I hire you? Wintertime's really good. January. January, we don't book as, you know, January is the time of year where trips book later. You can get last minute trips booked. A lot of guides don't book very many trips in January. And January is phenomenal for bigger fish. I mean, you get in stretches or I personally feel like I get in stretches every January where I go out and I know I'm going to catch 25 pounds on my best 5. Like I know I am. Now, I might not catch, you know, 6, 8, 10 fish in a day for that whole, you know, month-long stretch or 3-week stretch, but every day I go out there, we're going to catch 25 pounds. Early February, yeah, that's kind of like leaked over January. January, early February, for bigger fish, on average, unbelievable. To catch the absolute one single biggest fish, I still feel like it's the second half of March until it's basically March 15 to May 15. It's like that 2-month period, April in the middle, half of March, half of May. The absolute single biggest fish, the double-digit fish, the things like that, the majority of them for me have come in that time frame. But I'm going to go out and catch big fish, like real big ones every single day and catch big bags of fish every day. Man, January, other than like sometimes, and really even last year, like even the days after cold fronts, we still caught them. It didn't even matter. But January is the most consistent big fish month of the year, leaked over into the first part of February as well. Lake Fork Marina is having their, I think it's 25% off. Every November they do like appreciation month or whatever, and I think it's 25% off of all the tackle items in the store. By the way, the LGB rods that I designed that I cannot express to you guys how much I love and am happy with. All American made blanks, made, put together right at Lake Fork, one at a time. I mean, they are some bad mamma jammas. Those are for sale on Lake Fork Marina for 25% off right now, along with all their other tackles. So yeah, Lake Fork Marina, huge tackle sale at Lake Fork Marina. You might want to go order up. Like if you've been thinking about getting one of those rods and they're a little too pricey for you, you want a discount on them, you get 25% off right now on my rods and everything else at Lake Fork Marina's tackle store. Well, starting tomorrow you can. What am I using to fish fast? Again, that is going to depend on, like we talked about earlier with the low water. It's going to depend on cover that's present, bait source, size of bass that are typically in that lake. All those types of things are going to come into play. But winding baits, chatter baits on grass lakes, swim jigs on flooded cover lakes, square bills, lipless crankbaits, spinner baits, just winding baits, swim baits at times. Some certain swim baits you can fish really fast, really effectively. Certain topwaters you can fish fast, effectively. Buzz baits, whopper ploppers, and the buzz frogs you can fish really, really fast with topwaters. When I'm really wanting to fish super fast, those are the kind of baits I'm leaning to. Spring and fall. Y'all are talking about when to catch the biggest fish. Gotcha. What is this drop shot you speak of? I know I don't like using it. I did use it a lot more this fall with the low water. I will tell you that I sure did. Had my best topwater Saturday on a Chapo when it was cloudy and surface not choppy, some light ripples, fairly calm. Biggest explosion ever. Yeah, that's awesome. Those topwater explosions are something else, man. They're really good. Cole Lakely, you're very welcome. Thank you, brother. If your lake is one that gets a little stained when they drop the water, especially in the fall, a double Colorado spinnerbait is really good. That's solid advice there. Square. I really like square bills in that situation too, especially harder vibrating square bills. Michael Bray, he got him some of that January action last year. It's pretty. He'll tell you. He came out with me in January for a couple days last year. It's pretty stout, man. It's pretty stout. Winter usually has the biggest right up to spawn. Yeah. So back to the big fish conversation. The best time to catch a really big fish. Part of the deal in January, February, and early March is those fish are at their heaviest weight of the year. Those big fish, they're all females. And they're all very pregnant during that time of year. And their metabolism is slowed down. So everything they consume is going more to their body. They gain the most weight and they actually weigh the most in January, February, and early March, right up until they spawn, and they lose a little weight, of course. So yeah, that is the time of year. I mean, look at what goes on that time of year. Like Ivy's been the greatest example of that with Josh Jones and his magical machineries that he has on his boat. He's unbelievable with that stuff. But look at the fish that have come out of Ivy, and Ivy's been the best trophy bass lake on earth over the last couple of years. And look at when those fish are caught. They're not caught in July. They're not caught in May. The biggest fish of the year are caught in January, February, and early March. In the next 10 years, do you think there will be any major tournament advances that will change fishing as we know it? Example like the chatterbait years ago. Yeah, I mean, probably. I think we've already had another one with obvious. I think it's pretty obvious. We've had another major advancement with our electronics with forward-facing sonar, real-time sonar. That's been a huge advancement. I think, odds are, betting man would say more technological advancement is going to be where changing the face of fishing comes from the next time it happens. what else can we do from here where we are? Well, we couldn't have imagined this before, so there's probably something else we can't imagine now. I would say that right now, if you can get a Hummingbird 360 type of view that is live, like live sonar, combine that with our current forward-facing sonar, I think that's the next big technological advancement that'll really change things, will be Hummingbird 360 live. When that happens, now you can see the fish swimming, which direction he's swimming, over here to my left, behind my boat, wherever. I can pan my other one over to him, see how deep he is in the water column, and I can really even that much more pinpoint exactly where that fish is. By the way, lots of people talking about when to book a guide trip and all that. Not asking to book anything, but if you are looking for a guide, we would love the opportunity to earn your business. You can find us at yourlakeforkguide.com. We would love to get you guys out in the boat. Fall fishing has been good on other lakes. Lake Fork has been hit or miss. We've had some good days on Fork. We've had some bad days on Fork too. It's been hit or miss. It's been tough to know what you're going to get on a given day on Fork as far as consistency goes. The other lakes that I've been going to have been pretty consistently awesome. Like, it's been pretty darn good. We haven't, on our filming days, they just haven't lined up where our filming days where we're really cracking them. But we've had plenty of guide trips on other lakes lately where we're catching them good. Like, it's been some good days lately. Texas, they're gonna just, yeah, mimicking. And I know I'm behind on comments a little bit, but mimicking my statements, electronics is gonna be the big advancement. I agree. Blackman says I'm a sight fishing expert though, so pre-spawn is still good. Yeah, pre-spawn and spawn. I like the sight fish a lot. We do it a lot, and we've had some good luck, caught some big fish sight fishing. So that is part of the aspect. Is if you're looking for a real big fish and you book a trip in that March 15 to May 15 window, that's kind of prime sight fishing time. We get a chance to pass up on everything but the big ones. You know, that's kind of the deal then when you're sight fishing, and what I really like about it. And you can specifically go looking for your personal best if you want to be that extreme about it. But I've yet to find the customer that sees a 5-pounder on a bed and doesn't want to catch it. I haven't found that guy yet. That includes me. I don't want to pass that up either. Like, I'm gonna catch every 4 or 5 pounder I see on a bed. Like, that's gonna happen, or try to anyway. How many days? This is an interesting question, and one that I think is there's some misconceptions about. How many days do you think someone should wait to fish a lake after a big tournament out? Guys, we're talking about big tournaments in this region. What we're talking about is these hourly big, excuse me, hourly big bass tournaments. It can have anywhere from 700 or 800, 1,000, up to 2,000 or 3,000 boats at times on a lake like Fork or the KYKX tournament on Pines. I mean, Rayburn's got some like that are thousands. Crazy amounts of boats. How long should you wait after one of those events to go fish a lake? The common knowledge is that, the accepted common knowledge is that, you know, those fish, they just got beat up too much. They're not going to bite very good. And there can be truth to that. But also on these big lakes, there's so many fish in these lakes. And if you think about what's going on in that fish's world, right? Sound conducts underwater like crazy. And he's had 1,000+ boats zipping all over the pond for 3 days straight, usually. Constant noise, constant fishing pressure over the top of them. Then all of a sudden the lake gets empty and gets quiet. And bass don't have a memory for nothing. No fish do. So it doesn't take very long for when it gets quiet for those fish to kind of settle back in and go to eating. I've had some absolutely phenomenal days Monday morning right after some of the biggest tournaments that are on Fork. I think it depends on conditions, time of year, all that good stuff play into it. Obviously, like any day of fishing, those conditions play into it. But when you get a good day on the day after a major giant event, it's no problem. Like I've caught them fine. So I really wouldn't let that affect my decision making process at all. Well, I'm way behind on the questions now. Have I been fishing a hybrid hunter or swank lately? No, because I don't have grass on Lake Fork, so don't no I haven't. And that's to me that's a grass crankbait. Yeah, Chris, my old buddy Chris Blackman is back in the chat tonight. First time I've seen him in a while, and he is the one that did a lot of my podcasts and live streams with me for years. And work's just got my man tied up, and we don't really do those together anymore, unfortunately. But he's still my boy. He's in the chat tonight, and me and him actually way back in the day fished quite a bit together in that colder time of year that we're talking about, January, February, early March, whatever, for bigger fish. And he's talking about how the fish feed that time of year. And what happens is in January, February, March, or the early part of March, like in the colder water months, the colder the water gets, the slower fish's metabolism goes. That's just the reality of it. And male fish, who are the smaller fish, their metabolism just slows down. And that's just it. They don't eat as much. They don't have to. Female's metabolism does slow down, but she's pregnant. So ever been around a pregnant woman when they eat and they take it pretty serious? So do these female bass when they're pregnant. So they're gestating these eggs. So they have to eat far more than the male has to eat. So the percentage of fish that you catch that are bigger, mature females goes through the roof. And I think that's why the consistency of the day-to-day bags is so good. Even when you don't get very many bites, you don't need very many bites to catch a big bag of fish in January, February, and early March, because of that factor. Because their metabolism is slowing down for the fish population, but the females have to eat more, significantly more than the males. And the bigger she is, the more eggs she gestates, the more she got to eat. So your chances of catching and getting a bite from those bigger fish go way, way up. If you didn't have a boat and we're going to wade fish flats in the backs of creeks, what length rod are you using? Depends on the technique, right? That's going to depend on the bait that I'm throwing, but a long one. Because if I'm having to wade fish, I'm going to want the advantage of making a long cast. So whatever the longest rod I can get away on that technique is, I'm going to pick the longest one because that's going to help me make longer casts. Heard today they're trying to come out with a live that can tell the difference between different types of fish that you can color code on your graph. Make bass blue and trash fish red. Oh my gosh. Well, I wouldn't trust it. I'm going to tell you that right now. From years and years of looking at fish on electronics, all different kinds, I wouldn't trust that. When you get real good with them, you can tell the difference for the most part, but there's still times when you're wrong. And there's times when that deal's going to be wrong and it's going to cost you some opportunities. To me, it's a lot like that fish ID they put on the down scan in the sonars. That thing, junk. Always turn that off. Always turn that off. I would be very skeptical of that contraption if they came out with it. Can you talk about fall water temperature, how that affects bait fish and game fish? I've experienced in the past. The colder the water, the bite gets better. It doesn't happen all the time, though. Yeah, I mean, there's so many other. It's so hard to isolate one thing. Like, it's hard to isolate, like, when people ask me about one bait, like, that's very difficult. When you want to isolate one aspect of the water column, like temperature, there's so many other things that affect it. Daylight period, grass presence, other cover, rock, wood, all that is going to affect your bites and how many you can get and how effective you can be. Um, yeah, when you're coming out of summer, as the water gets colder and colder, the bites do get more plentiful. And to me, from October 15th to Thanksgiving, in that window, there's going to be 3 to 4 weeks in that window where that's going to be where the fall bite goes off, like is at its peak. We're in it right now. Unfortunately for Lake Fork, for whatever reason, it's not really happening. I'm actually going to fish with a biologist for the area tomorrow. We're going to talk about that, and I'm going to ask him some tough questions about why Fork is fishing so much more difficult than other lakes. Because for the last few weeks, when I go to other lakes, I mean, they're biting. Like, we catch them. It's fall. Like, it's the good fall bite. And fall's never going to be the most consistent time of year. It's just not. Because they get on bait fish, they move around a lot, and they're just there to feed. So some days they're there feeding, and some days they're not. And it's just kind of the way fall goes. And you get cold fronts. You get behind a cold front in fall, real hard one, it can be really tough. So just all those aspects make fall less consistent. But the good days in fall are crazy good, like crazy good. And yes, it does seem to fall where you get more bites as the water cools until about Thanksgiving. Once you get, and it may last a week or two past that sometimes, but really once you get into December, now the number of bites go down, but the size, the number of bites start to go down. They don't immediately go down in December, but the number of bites starts to go down in December, but the size, the average size of what you catch starts to go up about everything we were talking about earlier tonight. Let the swim jig fly this time of year. Yeah, no, swim jig is a great fall bait. There ain't no doubt. Busting Outdoors says he just can't seem to catch them on artificial baits in the winter. It's always been his demise. You got to slow, as much as we're talking about fishing fast, when the fish are moving around, when in the wintertime they really don't move. Once you get into like hardcore winter, they don't move very much in those colder water temps. And you do need to slow down in a lot of ways. I mean, even if you're fishing a grass lake and you're throwing a rattle trap and a chatterbait, the deal is wind it as slow as you can without it bogging down in that grass. Make repetitive casts in the high percentage areas with the drains and the ditches. Like, you still fish as far as where your boat moves and your coverage very slow in the winter. If you're dragging a jig, it's very slow. Fishing a jerkbait, longer pauses, very slow. That would be my first advice would be, you're not going slow enough. I would just guess. And I don't know, you may be. It may be something else altogether. You may just be on lakes that aren't that good in the winter. If you're fishing Lake Fork in the winter, go slower. I mean, you really got to slow down. And as much as I talked about how the pros fish a lot faster than the average angler, that has been during the warmer times of year. I have not fished with those guys in the winter, to be fair. I will say, in my experience, in the wintertime, most people fish too fast. Most people just have kind of a normal speed that they fish along an area at. And they don't really mentally focus and concentrate enough to adjust that speed based on what the fish should be doing or the type of bait they're presenting or whatever else. So try focusing on fishing slower in the winter this year, and maybe it'll help you. Like, really fish slow. Mr. Pack, old Mark Pack, man, world's a lesser place without him, that's for sure. Mr. Pack would take like 5 minutes per cast with a jig. Yeah, and he caught as many giants on a jig as anybody ever did at Lake Fork. Sure did. Man, we're going to wrap this up. Before we do, I want to mention something. We've had unfortunately, another tragic loss. And I will do a video more commemorative and more worthy of honoring this man the best way that I can. It's a guy that, the locals know, but maybe a lot of you that aren't from the area may not know. Aaron von Rossenberg. Very tragic, very unexpected. Heart attack issue. Early 50s, first half of his 50s, I believe. His wife works at the tackle counter there at Lake Fork Marina Tackle Store. He was an old rodeo cowboy and a great guy. I mean, in my experience with him, as far as I know, that dude is as good as it gets. Always been super friendly to everybody. Always hard worker, willing to offer help to everybody. Loved his family, loved his wife. Really, really solid guy, man. Really, really good guy. And I remember when Aaron, I'll save some of this for the video that I'll make remembering him, but I remember when Aaron first came to the lake and he had an old beat up fishing ski boat and didn't know a whole lot about bass fishing, and man, he was just always asking questions, and he was into it. You could tell he was going to get it, and by God, he did. He got it. He figured it out, and he got to be a very effective tournament fisherman on Lake Fork, and even this last year, he started guiding some and was doing a good job with his guide customers. And I did get one opportunity, and I'm so glad that I did, to spend one day in the boat with Aaron. Brought him out in my boat, and we fished together for a day and had a great time. We filmed a video, and I'm sure we'll see some replays of that when we make a video about him. But yeah, he was family. He was part of the Lake Fork family. He's part of the Lake Fork Marina family. And he was part of our little small. I talk about how small these communities are. They're very small, so it hurts when you lose somebody like this. And we've lost a lot the last couple of years, man. It's like, man, I don't know what's up, dude. It's just like we just can't quit losing people around there. Mark Pack was such a devastating loss for the Lake Fork community. He was one of the biggest legends of all time at Lake Fork. Ronnie Parker from Lake Fork Tackle passed away earlier this year. Devastating loss for the Lake Fork community. Huge figure around Lake Fork for a long time. Owned that company named after Lake Fork. I mean, just that Mark Pack started with him back in the day, and lost him. Louis Vaughn's another one that a lot of people, if you're not local, probably didn't know. But Louis Vaughn I didn't know Louis that well. Honestly, didn't really have a whole lot of interactions with Louis, but he had guided on the lake, some for a long time, and been around the lake forever, and had a lot of close friends around the lake that felt the devastation of that loss, and that happened within the past year or two. And man, it's just been a tough stretch. It's been a really tough stretch, and the one that probably hurt me most of all was Skeeter Fowler. Skeeter Fowler, longtime guide on Lake Fork, been a figure around the lake forever, and his son is a very good friend of mine. That I'm still, consider one of my good friends to this day, although we don't, you know, his son Austin now works at the Skeeter factory, and we don't have as much. He used to live next door to me, so we had a lot of interaction when Austin Fowler lived next door. But so we don't see each other talk near as much as we used to. But you know how it is; that don't change anything. He's still my boy, and I love Austin like family. And his dad was very, very good to me. Skeeter Fowler. That's the one that probably got to me the worst out of all of them. But man, it has been a tough stretch with that. And Aaron, you know, the heart attack thing, he wasn't unhealthy. He wasn't even half as overweight as I am, that's for sure. I mean, he wasn't skinny, but he wasn't overweight, you know, and just a shocking deal that just out of left field, out of nowhere. Extremely sad, extremely sad. Like I said, we'll do a better video to remember him better, but yeah, if you didn't have an opportunity to know Aaron, I'm sorry for you. And if you did, and you didn't know, I'm sure you know about what happened if you did know him. But yeah, man, just think about his wife, Miss Jody, up there. She's such a sweet lady. I can't imagine what she's going through right now. So keep her in your thoughts and prayers, and let's keep the memory of Aaron alive. If you knew him, good man, good man. So we're sorry that we lost Aaron. That's for sure. It's terrible. I'll miss his positive attitude and friendly demeanor and friendship he had to me. I'll miss that going into the marina all the time, you know, forever going forward. So, yeah, man. All right. Sad way to end it tonight, but Halloween special is over, man. Thank you guys so much for watching. Appreciate everything you've done for us over the years. And, you know, obviously what just happened, man, we never know when it's going to be our last time to tell people how we feel. So I'll tell you guys right now that despite any hardships or scary parts of this industry, like some of the stuff we talked about right now, or some of the negative things that I've experienced in this industry, I wouldn't trade it for the world. You know, just this morning I went and fished with my good buddy Heath Taylor from Smash Tech, and got to spend an absolutely beautiful day on the water, catching a few fish and hanging out and yucking it up with a very good friend of mine. And I don't get to do that if you guys don't watch and don't like and share and, you know, do all the stuff that y'all have done. You know, I've put the content out, but y'all are the ones that have built this platform for me, and I'm forever indebted, and I will always try to help y'all any way I can because of it. Thank y'all. Thank y'all very much. I appreciate it. We'll see you next time right here on your Lake Fork Guide.